The Wattage Ride from McKinney, Texas, just north of Dallas, Texas. The best ride south of the Red River, brought to you by the Wattage Coffee Company, which is located inside Cadence Cyclery in McKinney, and of course brought to you by your favorite local team, PACC, based in Plano, Texas. We need to go back in time. We were at mile 33 when I started my cameras, but let's just see what was happening before then. So this is our favorite little gravel trap that we go through, and it turns out it seems like it's actually safer when you bomb through it at 32 miles an hour or so. Went through it slower that time because we were essentially neutralized, but back wheels sliding out. Guys having fun. I don't know what's going on here. We're not allowed to have fun on this ride. We're supposed to be constantly on the rivet, not talking with each other, enjoying ourselves, telling jokes, and otherwise having a good time. Of course, just kidding. So action for me on this ride actually started at the very beginning when I went to answer nature's call in the traditional spot, but I was the only one who went. Being a middle-aged man, I've got my needs. Anyway, I rushed, to the start where they usually stop, and had to do a TT effort when I got on the back of the B group, who just sat there and waited while the A group went away. And then as they started rolling out from the B group, I was like, wait a second, I'm in the B group. Had the TT up to the A group. Luckily, they weren't going too fast. Now, what do we have going here? There was a breakaway up the road that I think included a teammate, if I recall correctly, Chad of Cadence. Sensing the danger, wanting to make an effort here, I recognized that he was planning to move up, so I quickly went from the back and followed his wheel, got on his wheel. He put in a major effort here. And that was putting me into the red zone for a second time on the ride so far. So we're about 19 miles into the ride at this point. And there's Clint there. So we're going to have a little guest appearance by Clint, some of his footage from his camera during the video. I'll show that later. And here's another example of, what is going on here? I think I'm going to be following another breakaway here in just a moment. And again, we're looking at examples of having to put in some effort on the ride at the beginning, which isn't always included. Sort of like the Tour de France, when, at least back in the old days when they didn't have 6 hours of coverage on a sprint stage, they would say, the breakaway's got 5 minutes here, and some stuff happened at the beginning. There was a hard fight, and you never got to see any of that stuff. Of course, now you can see all that stuff, but this is some of the hardest stuff that you will encounter in a race, is getting into the breakaway, initiating the breakaway, marking stuff for the breakaway, and some of that may work, some of that may fail. You can only do that so many times, and here I just cut to where we were off the front. I thought this was going to be the thing, because Chad was up there, John was up there, Clint, and nope, wasn't the thing. We were caught. Not sure the name of the rider in the blue kit. Oh, here we have Rhett. You may have to rewind that for just a moment, but that debris that was laying there, that was Rhett's phone. So he was messing with his phone apparently, and it came out and it blew up onto the road. It literally exploded probably into about 50 pieces, including popping off the road and hitting one of my teammates, at least a piece of the shrapnel there. And so we decided to neutralize and stop and wait for him as he went back to gather up the remaining pieces of his phone. And so why am I going off the frontier? Well, there are guys way up the road here that were initiating a breakaway, including a teammate. And at this point I realized if someone didn't make an effort to let them know that we were stopping, they'd probably just keep riding and riding and riding. So being the unselfish person I am, I was willing to burn a match to tell them to stop. Or perhaps more realistically, I knew that if I let them get away, I would have no chance to win myself, and it was a selfish maneuver to neutralize the race, the group ride race, and give myself a chance to win. But we wanted to stop so that Rhett could gather his stuff. He's kind of, you might call him an unofficial ride leader for here. So Chad on Cadence, the guy who I initially followed, he had a bike malfunction. He couldn't shift, so he ended up dropping out. And that was a very important storyline for this particular ride, because Chad is one of the strongest riders on this particular ride, no matter the week that he joined. So this week We had a couple of the Bike Mart guys, the Matrix guys that might normally be on the ride. They're up at Intelligentsia, is that how you say it? Intelligentsia in Chicago or wherever in Illinois. So they weren't here. And maybe a few guys were at Goat Neck, which is a very popular rally that's treated a little bit more like a race than most rallies. And that would be in Cleburne, Texas, which is, I don't know, about 70 miles south of Dallas. And of course, we've time warped back into our current front view, 33 miles in. And so this is where I had turned on my camera. So I made some cuts here of footage. So actually, the original footage, if you included all of the rear view only footage, was 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I thought maybe that would be too long to hold people's interest and me talk for that long. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. But I decided to do some cuts, which took some time. But here I am to serve you with these wonderful cuts to deliver you a video that is only 42 minutes. 42-minute highlight of a group ride. Now, it's not just an ordinary group ride, it's a race ride, which makes it different. It means that in most respects, it's treated like a race, and we have a finish line, and we have awards for people who finish. So that makes it a race ride. So I was mentioning maybe a little bit lack of participation this week, especially from other teams. Windsor was nowhere to be found. One of the Windsor riders, he broke his collarbone in an injury in a crash in a race. And we wish him well. He's one of the guys who would come out for this particular ride from time to time. So wish him well. So no representation from his team. So the story of this race, this ride, was essentially my teammate John, and I'll point him out when I see him here, riding off the front over and over and over again, joined by one, rider, Clint mainly, but other riders as well. And then the group working to reel him back in. So with the current riders we have on this ride, it's essentially a battle between Pack, my team, so the red and yellow, that's Francois right in front of me, he's a teammate. The red, yellow, and black, that's my team. And then you have all the Cadence riders, and they have different color kits from different years, but essentially you can basically think of everyone else as a Cadence rider. So the blue there is part of the Cadence family, the white and the yellow, the fluorescent. Here we are on a little downhill. The route was changed it's been changed the last few weeks due to road construction, and that was a significant issue for me because as a quasi-sprinter, I really need to know where the finish is in order to decide what to do, when to unleash the Kraken. And so, I was kind of in the dark about where the finish line, people would say is, go to the gas station, turn left, there's a pine tree and whatever. I can't figure that out. Just would have to rely on observation around me and asking teammates as we got closer. So this is what we call a hill in the Dallas area, and you can see just this tiny slope here. I think it might be like 7% grade, maybe a little higher, 8% grade. And we see a significant gap here. And approximately 4 of my teammates and 1 Cadence rider got away here. You can see that Rhett, he's the guy that dropped his phone. It's funny, before his phone dropped, I was looking at his phone, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. He's got like this, white connector that's really short, and it's hooked to this black connector that goes around, so, it doesn't crinkle his wires, and, when you don't have anything else to do on a ride, you're just staring at. It's better than staring at a guy's butt, I guess, is to stare at his phone. Anyway, ironic, the phone didn't make it. But anyway, and also kind of interesting is his bike, Neil Pride bike. So windsurfing manufacturer bike. He was talking about it, not to me, but to someone else before the ride. And I used to do some windsurfing from time to time. So anyway, I don't know if that's interesting. But anyway, so we got guys off the front here. And my role, as I perceived it for almost the entire ride, would be to mark attacks. I'm not initiating the break. I'm not trying to get into a break per se. But if somebody else is going to try to go to the break, I'm going to mark that. And so the strategy here is get on guys' wheels. And if they are moving up, just follow them. I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to help them get to the break, but I'm going to be on their wheel. That really discourages people from making these efforts. So he knows right now, as he looks back at me, that he is pulling me towards the break. The more ground he closes, the closer, um, the closer I am to joining the break with him. And so, it's sort of like, okay, you get one, then you're going to take one with you. And so you see that I have a teammate on my wheel. In fact, the entire group is now together as he's doing the effort to be in the wind here. It's a little bit of a crosswind. That's why I'm on the right-hand side. And I'm not going to be helping out. So you could say in a group ride, this would be kind of crappy behavior. And people will tell you in a race the same thing, like, oh, you didn't help me. Well, when it's a race, it's different. A race is different. And a race is about maximizing your chances of winning. When I say I mean your team's chances of winning. And so we see here, he's continued to put in a very strong effort. Look, I'm doing over 300 watts, close to 400 watts there. He's taking these turns very well. I'm not as good at turns as him. And I'm doing, 300 watts. Oh, okay, now, so it's a little bit less. So now he looks back. He's like, I've been on the front for a long time, a little bit of a downhill. And he's looking, I think, for some help to close up the rest of this gap. And again, I have not pulled through at all. And we're going to see in a minute just what happens here. So here we have a golf cart coming up, and we're going into a little bit of an uphill here. So we've been just on a downhill, now we're on uphill. He looks back, he flicked his elbow. Now it's my turn to go to the front. So instead of going over to the front to his left, helping him get a draft to go up, I decided to go hard. And so by going hard, I have dropped him and the group, and I am now bridging up to the group ahead. So this is even worse news for Cadence, because now we have, let's see, how many guys are up there? I can't even, the camera's bouncing around too much, but we have one Cadence rider and I think 4 plus me, pack riders. And this would be, of course, a supreme optimal situation in a race to have a breakaway like this. Of course, this would never happen in like a Tour de France situation. It was never happen. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, just so 3. 3, and I make the 4th. So a 5-man breakaway with 4 teammates. You're pretty sure that you're going to be able to probably drop the other rider just by tactics at that point, by attacking that rider over and over, if we can stay away. So what should we be doing now? The guys behind are chasing. You can see there, I'm doing about 270 watts here in the draft. Well, going up a little bit as we're going up the hill here. So we're going fairly hard here. We're not all in though. And, the guys in the back must be sensing danger. This is something that's very risky and it could get away. And Cadence riders. And so I don't know exactly what happened. I asked afterwards how we got caught or who did the work to catch us, and it turns out I think Lynn said that it was the 2 young riders that did it. So we had a couple of riders, the guys who were joking and talking amongst themselves, the tall, skinny, late teenagers, I would say. I was told that they did a lot of work, or all the work, to drag this breakaway back. So very promising break. I burned another match to get up to this, but we were caught, and a little bit disappointing. So that's a theme that happened over and over, where I did some work to move up and it didn't pay off into a breakaway that actually stayed away. So that's another lesson to learn, which is if you're going to have a breakaway actually stay away, it's not likely to stay away if people aren't fully committed, like full on gas. If we get caught, I'm completely dead and I'll get dropped. If you don't go to that level, there's much less chance that it's going to be successful. And sometimes what you need is the proper mix of riders so that people aren't motivated to chase. So that was not the proper mix. In other words, 4 on 1 was sending alarm bells through the peloton, so to speak. So I was including this footage to see John getting off the front with Clint. And if you may need to rewind it, but just on the right side, they kind of snuck off the front. It wasn't some huge attack from the back. It was just sort of a little bit of acceleration and going to the front. And the Cadence rider goes to the front to start pulling. A little bit of I think we're going into a bit of a headwind here. The wind wasn't super strong, about maybe, I think the forecast I was told was about 9 miles per hour. And You can look behind me. There's several Cadence riders behind me. And then we have all of us pack guys on the front here. So even though Cadence is not represented in this breakaway, it's just John and Clint. Clint's not on a team, although he does race. He doesn't race for a team. He races for himself. You can see that there's only one guy chasing this on Cadence. And so we ended up doing a lot of the pulls. I would say a couple of my pack teammates did fairly good pull, like hard pulls, and like pulls that you really wouldn't want to do in a race situation if you had a teammate up the road. But this is not exactly quite the same thing as a race. Although, we kind of treat it that way. So you can see here I get to the front, hard pull by the Cadence rider, and I'm kind of tooling, not going very fast at all, just not going embarrassingly slow, but just sort of soft pedaling or medium pedaling. Medium pedaling may be an exaggeration of how hard I was going. There's one of the young guys there, if I'm not mistaken. That's Nick. And Nick's brother, older brother, is the recent national national champion. And who knows, maybe someday we'll see Nick in the pro ranks himself. So talented young rider, and with his buddy somewhere back there in the group. And John is going away here. So again, another shot of Nick and me going to the front again. So you can see that if we have a breakaway here, and we are the ones on the front taking pulls, we're in a prime position to do well, and I think this breakaway is going to get away and stay away in a situation like this. In fact, I was wondering, just for kicks, if we might have Lynn or Steve, the two riders that are going by me right now, if we might have one of them or both of them try to bridge up, on the theory that Cadence may not have the energy at the moment to really match or mark that kind of attack. And then we'd have assurance that John and Clint would get away with a couple more riders. And maybe we can get, in other words, maybe we can get first and second and Clint gets third, for example. That would be the ideal scenario for us if one more rider could get to the breakaway. Cadence rider again, taking a strong pull here, and the other Cadence rider did a ton of work trying to pull back this breakaway. You can see him, of course, because of his fluorescent jersey. He's distinctive among the Cadence riders compared to the others in terms of what he's wearing, so easy to recognize. And again, I'm bad with names. I've forgotten names. I'd be saying or maybe I shouldn't be saying names if I know them, but kind of forgotten for the moment as I'm sitting here recording this. So we're making a right-hand turn here. This is going, let's see, west. So, and we'll be quickly here taking a right. Very soon here, we're going to be showing footage from Clint. So breakaway footage from Clint in just a moment that is synced up to my footage. And it will be in the lower left-hand corner. There it is. So that's where John and Clint are. Clint is in the black and white striped jersey, and I'll point him out later. Ooh, is that foreshadowing? Is that foreshadowing that we're going to catch him? He is in the black and white jersey. And John there, you can see in the bottom left, there's Clint going by John, and John on his wheel. They've already made this turn to the right. This is the most famous, iconic turn on the entire ride. It is the turn into the Ranchettes, because the Ranchettes is traditionally the most important, sorry, that's my dog scratching on the door. The Ranchettes is the most important part of the ride, in the sense that normally, in the summer months at least, you're going to have a tailwind here because it's headed north, the route is, and the wind is coming from the south. It is rolling, and it is relatively near the end. So it is strategic and important, and sometimes a little bit technical. I mean, not a lot technical, but technical enough that people have crashed on some of these turns and things. So that's a reference to you, Lynn, if you're watching this. Lynn crashed on this turn coming up right here. It's a tiny bit off camber, and you might get a tiny bit of gravel. And if it's a little bit wet, you never know what'll happen. Of course, it doesn't look like much right there, and it wasn't much today, but the time he crashed, I think it was wet. So, you'll have to be looking at a large screen to really see Clint's power data, but there in the bottom left of his video are his watts, and you can see his speed. The speed, of course, will vary based on the terrain because this is up and down, both some rollers through here. I guess it would be pretty cool if I could take the difference between the distances and also approximate, have an inference as to my current speed, as to the gap. It'd be cool if I had like a rolling number with like a seconds ahead here and how far they are ahead. But they're substantially far ahead right now. We can kind of see them, but it is not a small gap. It's going to take a really large effort for somebody to close this gap on their own. And at a certain point here, I think I'll point out where it is. I actually mentally counted the gap, and it was about 31 seconds. So I think that was probably the largest the gap was. The Cadence guys were putting in a big effort to close down this gap. Again, sorry, that's my dog scratching on the door. Kudos to them. It was hard work for them to constantly be doing this. I guess good practice, good fitness. But of course, as they say in a race, you prefer to be in the break rather than the guys chasing the break the whole time. That allows the rest of us on our team, pack, to rest and just mark things. Me up here in the front, like second wheel, third wheel, that's not the ideal place to rest. Nor is covering attempts to bridge. That is not the ideal way to rest. That's burning a match to do that. So we can see here a bit of a downhill. I'm not even pedaling, and there's no one coming to the front for the moment to drag this back. Looking at Clint's video here, they're getting closer and closer to the end of the ranchettes portion, where they will turn left up there. So we're going to see this T intersection coming up in just a little bit. Teammate Steve goes to the front, and so I'm not calling anyone out or anything, but there were a bunch of guys sitting in and not taking pulls, at least on the other team, and the only reason I can assume that's the case is because they were tired and didn't have the energy to do that. So a significant attack here from Cadence, and Lynn immediately marking that. Me on Lynn's wheel. There's a gap behind for just a moment here. We're going uphill. I know it's a little bit hard to tell uphill elevation, downhill elevation when I don't have on the video without a marker here on my data. And you can see that guy behind me, he looks under his shoulder. He's trying to see what kind of gap is going on behind him. And so this is what I'm remarking as to the rolling nature of this. I think at this point I had already counted off the 31 seconds, and so the gap is coming down as we get closer and closer to the end of the ranchettes portion of this ride. Yeah, this is a really fun part. It's just you like cruising downhill. You feel like a fighter jet here, going left. You're going 35 miles an hour. Probably be fun on a motorcycle right here, right? Your knees like scraping the pavement. Of course, we don't do that on our bikes, thank goodness. Don't want to scrape any knees on pavement. But it's super fun and fast, especially with the tailwind. We do have a bit of a tailwind here. So if this guy goes boom, boom, like he's accelerating, and then just boom, like stops. I moved over to cover him and follow him, but not quite sure what he was doing there. I guess he put in a bit of an effort, and then maybe thought maybe the hill kind of came up and was a little bit more than he was expecting. Anyway, teammate on the front. Was that Jeff who just passed? I didn't notice for a second, but I think it was Jeff on the left side that kept his momentum up and put in some good power on the pedals, and he's at the front of the group right now. So we're taking a look at Clint. So we've closed this down quite a bit. You can see that Clint here is about to make this left-hand turn, and we are soon to make this left-hand turn as well. So definitely at this point we know that the gap has closed down quite a bit, and anytime the breakaway gets closed down, it's a new chapter. So we just got a brief view up ahead. We didn't quite see them, and on the video we could see them in person, and I would guess that the gap was less than 12 seconds or something like that at this point. Now coming up is again something we call a hill in Texas, and this again is a significant strategic portion of this ride, going up this hill, because it is short, it is steep, and when you have to put in 600 watts, whatever it is, to maintain your place in the group without getting gapped, that is a hard effort. I was recently in Arizona and doing some climbing, and like, oh, you're gonna go back and you're gonna kill it on the rides or the hills up here. Well, they don't do they don't do these short high energy bursts. It's you're gonna do 80% FTP going up a climb. You're not gonna be doing 2 times FTP going up the climb. And so you can see here I'm above 700 watts and a little bit gapped. I'm having to accelerate here to get onto the wheel and make sure that no gap is left open, because boom, right over the top here, someone attacks and there's a gap. Don't want to be in that position. So I was recently, in Arizona, and visiting the in-laws, and of course that meant I had to be on the bike almost the whole time. And I was very curious to see if, how the legs would hold up. Would this have any impact? Would this pay off? Would I be able to do well on this ride? Whether that means winning or quote-unquote podiuming or being a good teammate who does important efforts. I would say I felt like I could burn matches. I had a lot of matches to burn. I don't know if that had anything to do with the riding in Arizona, but if I had to guess, I would say it had a little bit of benefit. You can see that we're just about to make this catch, and we're looking at Clint's video down there on the left, and Clint is now on John's wheel, and kudos to both of them. If we could hand out little red numbers for most aggressive for next week's Wattage Ride, we would put it on Clint and John's jerseys. Of course, it would create a few more safety pin holes in their jerseys, but that's okay. It's their jerseys, not mine. What would, racing 101, what should we do when they get caught? Well, we should counterattack. We should send somebody else up the road, and presumably the people that have been chasing are going to be tired. They don't want to chase anymore, and they're just going to raise the white flag and say, no, we cannot chase this. The elastic will break, and we will go on to glory and triumph and free lattes for the podium. But what's going to go on here? Now, someone could be saying, well, why don't you be the person to attack? Good question. Maybe I should. Maybe I did. Of course, I'm sort of the omniscient narrator here. I already know what happens. Short of dementia and Alzheimer's, after I've done the ride, I already know what happened on the ride. And again, like I said, I kind of had the mentality of just following. I'm willing to bridge. I'm willing to accept your bridge to the break, but I didn't ever initiate a break. And part of that could be strategic, sort of as a quasi-sprinter type. I have a role to play too, which is if you don't drop me, then there's a chance you've got to account for me in the sprint. Now that's not bragging. It's it's just that I like my odds in the sprint. And when I was on this ride, I was looking around for Stephen Euler, because we had a memorable sprint finish together in a previous Wattage Ride that I won, and he passed me in the sprint by just like a few inches. His wheel went ahead of mine, and then I kind of put in another effort and just barely beat him at the line. And I didn't know who Stephen was before that ride, but see, that's the difference. Now I'm looking for him on this ride. Now he wasn't on this ride, so that's it's sort of like you want to know everyone's strengths and weaknesses, because then you can anticipate what might happen. And no, I didn't know everyone on this ride. No, I didn't know their strengths and weaknesses. But also, I like practicing sprinting. That's something that takes practice, and I don't have a lot of practice at it. So one can practice the things that either one is kind of good at, or also the things that one is not good at. So maybe the next time I should have a different goal, which is to initiate breakaways and try to initiate breakaways and see what happens. Just because it's not something I normally do, and I don't perceive myself as being good at that, or having really the kind of motor or profile for that. However, do something different. Life is short. Why do the same thing every time? You like chicken noodle soup? Don't eat it for every meal. You like sprinting? Don't always do the same thing. Learn and grow as a person and a cyclist. So, and it's not like somebody would say, oh, we wanted you to stay in the group and be a sprinter. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what I do. There goes Clint again, and there's John again. And I'm like, didn't we just freaking see this about like for the 10th time? John and Clint going away. So if you'd like, just take a look at Clint's power numbers so you can see what kind of effort it took for him. You might have to rewind it a little bit here, but what kind of effort it took for him to gap the group and to catch up to John. And I would not say it's like a full gas chase to get back up to them. In some ways the elastic had already significantly weakened due to all this chasing and not enough guys doing the chasing. So this is the alternate route. It's not the normal wattage finish route, and that's due to construction. When we took that left next to that windmill, that's the alternate route. And I foreshadowed earlier in the commentary that I do not know where the sprint finish is. I've done this route one time before, and we didn't know where the sprint finish was either, except for one certain Joseph, who said the sprint was up here. We're going to take a right in a little bit, and he said the sprint finish was the end of that before we teed. So I had that in the back of my mind as that potentially being the sprint finish. Gosh, our group is a lot smaller than when we started. I wonder what happened. So, oh boy. Here we are sitting in and watching these two guys way in the distance. So we've taken that right, and the last time we did this, we said the sprint finish was the end of this road, and it was sort of an anticlimactic finish because when you're told you've already passed the finish, you didn't really contest the finish, and the person that claimed he knew the finish was the first person up the road. I mean, he was solo breakaway off the front, and so this is a little hijinks I was kind of pulling a little bit, which was to just kind of let Mike roll off the front. Mike's a diesel kind of guy that he can just put out power and just keep going and going. Not big on the sprint per se, but if we could get one more teammate, I was hoping we'd have one of our guys try to bridge up here, and you can see that Rhett closed that down just boom in a second, but didn't attack Mike, didn't try to bridge up himself. I was accelerating in case that was the case. Here we are on the downhill, and I'm following Mike here. This is not ideal sprint position. Well, it's better to be maybe like fifth wheel, so you can kind of see what's going on behind you, and you're less likely to be surprised by someone coming up from behind. You don't want to be catching wheels from behind per se. You want to be anticipating, immediately getting on wheels and following. So look on the rear view side on the right, and you can see the young guys here are about to put in their attack because why? I don't know. But anyway, I thought this was the finish myself. So I'm quickly on his wheel. His teammate is right to the right off camera, and I'm continuing to put out power here. And I thought here that the sprint finish was that yellow sign up here. So putting in a sprint effort here, I want to say I hit the biggest watts that I've hit in quite a while, maybe in the last couple months. I think it was something like 1350 watts or so, something like that, which is very unusual for me in a group ride / real race situation. So I guess kudos to me for usually something like that, it's like 1100 watts. Anyway, so took I think having to get onto his wheel and stay on his wheel provoked a bigger effort than normal. And so at this point, I'm thinking these two guys are 1 and 2. I was number 3, and I'm rolling up to them. They don't really look like they're going very hard. A little bit of a downhill here. You can see Clint wasn't even pedaling right there. And I get up to them, and John notices I'm here, looks back at me, and I say, hey, is that the finish? Are we just rolling back home? And they're like, no, the finish line's way up here. I'm like, oh, great. But the good strategic thing is now I've accidentally bridged up to the breakaway. And I'm a little bit tired because I put in a maximum effort, which turned out to be a breakthrough effort, first one in quite a long time on Exert, which I could explain in some other time in some other video. But essentially that was effort that makes the model change as far as my fitness calculation in the Exert algorithm, which, if your signature is declining over, say, a month, you could have a fitness breakthrough, but it's just a breakthrough, meaning that you're now showing something better than 2 weeks ago, but maybe not something better than 3 months ago. Anyway, here's another lesson. If you're going to make a breakaway stick, you can't be like resting. You can't be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to let the lactic acid shake out of my legs and feel good. You have to keep going hard. No matter, you have to be pushing into the red. And there's a chase going on behind this. And so John wanted me to pull through there, or was expecting me to pull through. I say, John, let me skip one more pull and catch my breath. And so Clint's on the front. And again, Clint's not going super hard here, 150 watts, 170 watts. We're just not going fast enough to stay away. And these guys have been away for a long time. They've been doing a lot of effort while I've been sitting in on wheels for a long, long time. So I assume that they're a little bit tired. So here we are. We can see riders coming up to us and bridging to us. And so kudos for that, meaning that we are, we are back to status quo. I'm just looking at the rear view video now, so I didn't realize that the group was so small, that it was just 2 guys who bridged up to us. I kind of looked back and I thought, oh, the group is back with us, but gosh, I didn't realize it was just Rhett and Steve, my teammate. So essentially now we are still the breakaway, except that 2 guys have now bridged up to us. And it's funny, when you watch these videos, you may learn something that you should have known before, but you don't learn until you watch the video and do your own quote-unquote race analysis. So John at the front here, now you can see. So if any of you have been wondering what my bike looks like, or what I look like on the bike, you can now see me. There I am. I'm 2 wheels ahead. That's me right there. So Clint just went past me there. And my bike was rattling like a claptrap, or it was my bottle cage, the rivet came out about 3 weeks ago or something, and it's like shaking and rattling like you wouldn't believe. Like, I've got pebbles in a can, and I've got a creaky bottom bracket. The bike sounds awful. I have to remove like the bottom bracket and like grease it every 3 weeks, or it creaks. Whenever I put the grease on, it stops creaking. And this is the Energizer Bunny up ahead of us, me, and that's John off the front. So he's been constantly initiating going off the front, and we're in a good tactical position here. We have 3 out of the 5. So you can think of this as 3 versus 1 versus 1, because presumably Clint and Rhett are not collaborating, and me, Steve, and John are collaborating. So I'm kind of laughing at my own thoughts and tactics at this minute, because there's going to be a minute here where I talk about I'm like on the front and it was bad position, but somehow in my mind there are 15 people behind me, or 10 people behind me, or I don't know how many. So I didn't realize there were so few. I could have easily been behind 2 riders. Anyway, we'll talk about that in just a minute. So Clint's putting a little effort up this hill. So essentially the finish line is coming up here. I was told you have to go over 2 hills. It's the top of the second hill. And you can see John up there. Clint's done an effort. I am not going to, I'm not going to hammer it going to my teammate. In a race situation, ideally, I would be on some wheels here. I would not be on the front. And so I'm noticing that, oh yeah, that must be the finish line way at the top of that next hill. You can see me in the video on the bottom left. I'm going to scoot over to the left here, and I am like, this is a bad position. I'm on the very front. It's going to be hard for me to react to an attack, but I need to be looking over my shoulder, waiting and listening for an attack. Clint is going to go, boom, and I quickly get on his wheel, and Steve is on my wheel, teammate here. So on Clint's wheel, and now I'm sitting, trying to drafting and getting a rest, and then deciding when to attack. So boom, I attack, I go, Steve is after me, Clint is falling back, and now I'm headed up towards John. So this is one of those tactical situations where you have the team, the winner up the road per se. The yellow sign is the finish line. Should you have to figure out, am I towing somebody to beat the both of us? Am I how to handle that tactical situation. Also Steve's situation where should he be pulling someone up to me? A little bit complicated. I have thoughts about that. My thought is, in general, as a sprinter, when you go, you have to go, and you can't think about those kinds of things. You have to go all out, because if you can go there, your competition, your sprinters can also go there. And if you can beat your teammate, your competition can beat your teammate. And your job as the sprinter is to win the sprint. And anyway, that's my position on that. If you can win the sprint, you should try to win the sprint. And worked out good for us. So, number one, number two, and number four in the finish of this fun group ride that is treated mostly as a race called the Wattage Ride, and good times. Anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. There's my dog again. And perhaps consider subscribing. Thank you.